This is the Truth Network.
Hidden treasures of the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Oh, we get to dive into another amazing verse with lots to learn today in the 7th chapter of the Song of Solomon. We are in verse 11, which is the hoof verse, and the hoof has to do with cover, and I think you'll see how this verse has us covered in so many different ways. Absolutely spectacular. So we have heard her declare her a love for her beloved in the last verse, and now she says, "Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the field, let us lodge in the villages." And of course, you know, those of us in the masculine journey, we love the idea of adventure, and so naturally there's nothing like communing in adventure, and this is exactly what's going on here. I would say, actually, as I thought about this verse, it's a beautiful image of what Jesus shared in the 4th chapter of John, where he talked about that the fields were white for harvest, right? And when you think about that, it actually speaks to this verse in a lot of ways. In fact, Jesus, when he teaches about the fields are white with harvest, he goes on to say that you are reaping where you did not sow. And so he says, you know, the saying is true, which is the saying comes out of Micah chapter 6, which it's worth reading the whole chapter to kind of get the vision of what this verse is saying, because it's so true that what Jesus is talking about there is that the Jews are the ones that did the reaping, but they're not the ones that are doing the sowing. And interestingly, they're not doing it because they're not under the blood. And so the neat thing about this verse, when you look at it is the 11th verse in the way that we read the Song of Solomon, but it is the 12th verse in the way the Jews read the Song of Solomon. So it is the Huff verse for us. In other words, we're covered, but it is the Lamed verse for them. And so the challenge is that they are first, but in this case, they're last because they're not under the blood, you see? And in order for that to be under the blood, they'd have to be, you know, under that hoof. And so the word villages there is the word in Hebrew, which means cover. In fact, it's the very word that Noah used to cover the ark. It is the cover of the ark of the testimony. I mean, this is literally the blood of Christ. And so because we're in the blood of Christ, then we get to go in communion with him into the field and let us lodge in the villages. The really interesting thing about this to me is if you read Rashi on this particular verse and Matthew Henry, you get a real vision of what I'm explaining here, because Rashi goes on to explain that what this verse means to the Jews is that they're supposed to go out into the field and in the villages, and they're supposed to share with God how the children of Esau don't believe in him. And, you know, if you think about that, us being, I guess, the children of Esau, you know, we now are the ones that believe, and they don't even believe that God came. And so, you know, you have that challenge right there, okay? And so the first will be last, and the last in this case are first. And it's the difference between the 11th and the 12th verses right there. And they did so, but we are reaping. And what a beautiful thing that it is that we get to reap, because we're in this communion, because we are under his hoof. We're under the blood of Christ. You know, absolutely spectacularly. I was just thinking about how fun is all the adventures that we get to go do, because the fields are white for harvest. And the idea is, this is, you know, still within the idea of what Jesus was talking about, you know, how wonderful is our love for delights. And so if you're like me, I mean, I was thinking about it, man, Tuesday nights, I get to meet with the men of the masculine journey, and that field is white for harvest. And Wednesday nights, I'm going to be leading our church service, and that field is white for harvest. And Thursday morning, I get to go do Christian Businessmen's Committee, and that field is white for harvest. And Thursday night, we have a Bible study in our neighborhood. where a lot of brand new believers are coming, new disciples. Oh, it's just white for harvest. And then Saturday morning, I get to do all my shows. Every single day, I get to do this podcast. And then Sunday morning, often I get to preach. This Saturday night, I get to do a special needs Sunday school party for Christmas. And it's just, man, everywhere I look is people have sown, but I get to reap in so many different ways. I mean, it's really amazing how this verse plays out, because as we go into communion, right? And I was just communing with the Lord just wonderfully this morning. And I should tell you that I often wrap up in a blanket because it's kind of cold this time of year. And as I wrapped up in that blanket this morning, I just felt the Lord's arms around me. I felt a warmth. I don't know that I'd ever felt quite as warm as I felt this morning. And I could just sense the communion with him. And the communion was so sweet as I thought about this verse. And again, I would urge you to read Malachi 6. It's a sad commentary on those who on those who sowed who didn't get a chance to reap yet. But they will reap. And I believe that in all my heart. And so it's our job, obviously, to be that palm tree and look like an oasis to the Jews, whatever, that they might seek that communion. Because again, as I mentioned, and to me, it's worth reading Rashi and Matthew Henry on this. You can tell Rashi's commentary is very cold and very matter of fact. Well, Matthew Henry just waxes eloquent completely based on his communion with Christ and how wonderful it is, that he gets a chance to commune with him in the fields, right? The fields is where, the palms are, where the vines are budding and all these people that are coming into Christ. And then you get to lodge. In other words, we get to come into the cover of Christ and into that sweet, sweet place of communion with him, which again is out of the city and out into the country, and then in the villages, right? Once again, with the just simple, country folk. However that works out, it's beautiful in your life. It's beautiful in mine. Thanks for listening.